Thank you all so much for joining us for the Mentorship in the Workplace workshop. Joining us today is Dr. Patricia Green. She's going to be discussing the ingredients to finding and creating healthy professional mentorship in the workplace. So I'm going to hand it over to her to get us started. Thank you.
Thanks, Nevada, and hi to everybody. So I'm eager to talk about mentorship, and I'm going to start off by telling you a little bit about myself and UNLV, then segue into what do we mean by mentorship, and walk you through what I hope will be a useful tool for you to think about how do you intentionally manage your mentorship opportunities in the workplace. So that's my game plan. As Nevada said, I know that you're all muted, but I would strongly prefer that we get to talk to each other, and it's a fairly manageable group. So if there is something, feel free to put in chat that you'd like to say something, or you can just enter it in chat and we'll manage it that way. I will save time at the very end for a specific, just for general question and answers. But if something comes up in between that you'd just like me to say more, or it wasn't clear, or anything like that, just sing out in chat and we'll get to it. I put a bunch of titles here, again, to set context about the kind of workplaces I'll be referencing when I talk about my experiences in that. My current position is COO, so Chief Operating Officer of Tilted Windmill Games. Tilted Windmill Games is a startup. We make casual niche games for social influencers in the social media space, mega influencers in the social media space. That's a new one for me. If anyone's interested to learn more, take a look at Nathan the Cat Lady and then stay tuned for the game coming from there. So that's the Tilted Windmill Games piece. Professor Emerita, Babson College is the #1 college in the country for entrepreneurship, and I was a professor, the dean, and provost there for a number of years, long enough that when I left to go into government, I became Professor Emerita, which basically is an honorary title, signifying that I always have a relationship with them. I also serve as the educational advisor to Portfolio, to their nonprofit arm, the Women Investors Academy, which means that I design educational programs for women to learn how to invest in women-owned and led businesses. The idea is that women can invest in creating the companies that they want to see in the world. So that's the Portfolio piece. And I was the 18th director of the Women's Bureau for the U.S. Department of Labor. If you don't know the Women's Bureau, they are the chief advocate for women in the workplace in the country. They work on things such as paid leave, equal pay, child care, educational opportunities, basically 15 different ways in which women have the potential to experience life differently coming into the workforce, what happens while they're there, and the rewards they take away from it. And I put all these things up just to show that over the obviously quite a lot of years, I've worked in large businesses, small businesses, the educational, so the nonprofit environment, and the government. So any type of workplace that we want to talk about, I've got some experience there. So that's the short version of my eclectic career. Nevada, let me go to the next slide. So UNLV, I am very clear with folks that UNLV changed my life. I have my MBA from UNLV a lot of years ago. I think it was 88. I should know that, but I think it was 88. And it was really there that the idea of having a mentor and how a mentor can impact your life came into play. And what happened was, before I got to UNLV, I had an undergrad degree from Penn State in health planning and administration. I had worked in nursing homes. I'd been a long-term care administrator, licensed first in Nevada, then California, then Pennsylvania. And then I married an active duty military person, thank you, Nellis Air Force Base, moved to Spain and was out of the workforce for a number of years while I had my children. When we came back to Nevada, I went back to school to get my MBA, and that's where I met Dr. Collins, who was my marketing professor. And through Dr. Collins, recognized that I was a non-traditional student and that I was older. I had 3 children, and I had an active duty Air Force pilot husband who was gone most of the time. And yet he recognized that I really liked school. I did well at school. He helped me in getting a Conrad Hilton assistantship. And working for him, he taught me a lot about working and thinking. So he really mentored me through not just graduate school, but how to think about careers and life just from having general conversations. One of the most striking things he ever did was to say to me one day, you know, Patty, you don't always have to be moving. Sometimes you can just sit and think. And I have used that so often in working with small business owners, entrepreneurs who are always extremely busy people. And I've been able to kind of channel Dr. Collins in saying that thinking is doing something and it's a critical piece of doing. So that was one of the long-term things I took away from Dr. Collins, who unfortunately died about 4 years ago. But there was also Dean Cummings. And Dean Cummings, I met through Dr. Collins, and he asked me if I'd like to teach at Nellis my last semester in my MBA program. So I taught intro to finance, I taught intro to marketing. Frankly, I think if I'd stayed there long enough, I would have taught intro to most of the business programs. And what helped me a lot about there is, first off, he gave me that opportunity for teaching, and I decided that if I could teach sergeants, I could teach pretty much anybody. So that was an opportunity he gave me, but he also mentored me again on thinking through career paths. And he's the one that said, you know, Patty, you do like this. You like the academic life and you're good at it. Have you thought about getting the lovely name of your terminal degree? Have you thought about going for your doctorate and becoming a professor? And I truly had it. So as a mentor, he really opened my eyes to other possibilities than what I thought I'd do is just go back into the healthcare industry. There was a great amount of conversation around those kinds of things and how it would happen and how to apply and where and all these types of things. But to keep that part of it fairly short, I ended up at University of Texas, and my very first day, my very first class, I met Dr. John Sibley Butler, who ended up being my mentor, who is still my mentor, and this was, in the 90s. Again, in thinking about what kind of professor I wanted to be, what kind of school I wanted to work at, how I worked with students, he's still someone that I can talk to about anything, but especially related to my career. Now, I would like to ask all of you a question. You can either, I think it's probably best to answer in the chat room. Does anybody notice anything interesting about my three mentors? So this is the interaction part. Just to take a look. There they are. Anybody notice anything? Yes, thanks, Brian. They are all men. And I have thought about that. I certainly didn't think about it while it was happening. And you have to think back. I'm talking, 20 some years ago, probably more. Yeah, more. And frankly, at that time, there were not a lot of senior women in higher education. There just weren't. There were starting to be more women who were assistant professors, associate professors, but as far as full professors and deans, there weren't many at that time. Now it's strikingly different. I mean, I have many, many female colleagues in this role. There's still fewer at the most senior levels, but it is something that I often think about is what would be different about that if it had worked out that way. All I can say is these three gentlemen changed my life. Why don't we go on? So there are a lot of words thrown out, mentor, coach, champion. I picked out here to talk about what are each of these and what's the difference. To me, the mentor is the more general. They use their knowledge, their expertise to guide you. You provide the context, but they're really giving you more general conversations, usually putting ideas in front of you. Some will say yay or nay on whether they think things are good ideas. Some won't. But it's a more holistic approach to guidance. A coach, just like an athletic coach, trains you in a particular skill. Like I've had speech coaches, I've had presentation. I've had all kinds of coaches. I've had life coaches, but even that was about planning. So that's a much more directive kind of thing. And a champion, a career champion, this is something we've heard about more over the last decade or so. Usually that's an internal person who actively supports your advancement. So they are not only talking with you, but they are talking about you to others and helping you look at where is that next position and who can they talk to help you advance. So there's a little bit of difference between what kind of things that they do. And today I really am going to focus on the mentor, the person, the more holistic, the more generalist kind of approach. So Nevena, there we go. Oh, I was playing with the idea of the steps for mentor because we talk about that, and there are formal mentoring programs. Some of what I'm talking about will pertain to formal mentoring programs where if you go into a new organization or into a new type of position, you might be assigned a mentor. I'm going to focus more on the informal mentoring that you set up for yourself, and then you can see what applies back and forth. But I use the idea of the Ferris wheel because it's a dynamic. It's a dynamic process. It continues. It's not get your mentor and that's your mentor forever. It's really what is working for you, what do you need, and how is it working for you. So I'm going to talk through each of these steps just a little bit, but then we're really going to play with them because again, we have a nice sized group to go through this. Ask questions as you see fit. So the first question really is, identifying, who is the right mentor for you? Who do you want to be a mentor? And that has to do with first thinking about what's the context? Are you looking for a career person in a specific industry? Are you looking for someone to guide you just in making the transition from school to a profession, your first professional job or your next professional job, I should say, that type of thing. And one of the hardest things I think for people to think about is not just a type of person. You don't want necessarily someone who just happens to be in hospitality, but specifically, who do you want to do that? And the question is, how do you find them? We can talk more about some ideas about, trade associations, through your neighbors or your parents, through friends, through professors, through news items, those types of things. But mostly the idea is, how do you identify who you want? The second question that comes up a lot as far as identifying has to do with the level of person. And I've had people say to me, well, I would like Elon Musk to be my mentor. Well, so would I. But, well, maybe I would. But the level of it, how do you decide, do I want someone who's just a little bit above me? Or do I want someone who's at the top of the game? Do I need someone who's kind of a celebrity, at least in their industry, that type of thing? And that's fine, because you probably have more than one mentor. And if there's some reason that you need somebody that's way up in that influencer category, think about it. Sometimes they'll say yes, sometimes they'll say no. But, at this, we all need to be able to take no's and move on. But it is something to think about is, who do you want to be a mentor? And not to negotiate yourself down first and say, oh, they'd never do it. Why would they do that? You never know. They had mentors. A lot of people want to give back. So with the identifying, it's how do you get from the general to the specific, and how do you support your confidence levels in deciding at what level do I need this person to be? Those are the general ideas behind identifying. Then there's the request. Once you know the specific person, how do you approach them? And I have to admit, I like talking about tactics. Not just general, we'll go find them and ask. It's, where, how, what are the best ways, those types of things. And it's different for different people. But that's part of your homework too, is to figure out this particular person. what's the best way to reach them in a way that they will be most likely to say yes. Now, under COVID, that changes everything. It changes that you're probably not going to meet them at a conference or a trade meeting or the Chamber of Commerce or, whatever it might be. Right now, it's very likely that it will be a virtual. What are the degrees of separation? Do you know somebody that could do a warm introduction? Or it may be somebody you already know, but you've never asked them to be a mentor in a more agreed upon way. So again, thinking through what's the best way to get them. Then it's the idea of knowing what you're actually asking them to do. Personally, again, obviously at a later stage in my career, I have people often ask me, just bluntly, will you be my mentor? And that means very different things to different people. For some, it's a very general, oh, I just want to learn from you, but who knows what that means. To others, when a more formal, we can sit down, we can meet, that type of thing. So thinking through what you want to do, and this will lead into the draw-on part. What are you asking for? Are you asking for, may we have a formal phone call, an hour a month type of thing? Or, again, post-COVID or whatever we figure out what post-COVID means. May I take you out to coffee every other week? Or might we just Zoom, once a month, those types of things. But figuring out exactly what you're asking. They're going to want to know why. Why did you pick me? Why are you asking me? And this is where you make your sales pitch. I'm asking you because we have a UNLV connection. I want to be a professor. I'm also from Pennsylvania. Though whatever it is, whether it's the personal or the professional, what is the hook that's going to make them want to say, yes, I'd be happy, I'd be delighted to be your mentor. And then we can lay out, and this is what I'm thinking about, this is how we might go about it, and those types of things. But again, this is an intentionality plan with you obviously having thought through what you're hoping to learn from them. So that's the idea about the request. The draw-on, that's how are you going to work together? Again, the idea here is, how are you going to prepare for everyone? This is almost like when we teach about how do you do we teach business owners how to run their board meetings. What are you going to do to prepare for this meeting? Are you going to send them anything beforehand? Just like, hey, it's time for our monthly phone call. Here's the 3 things that are on my mind that I'd love to bounce off you. That's just one idea. There's lots of ideas on how to prep, but the idea is to prep. Another one is, here's a job that I'm thinking about applying for. I'd love to run through why I think it's a good idea and hear what you think as well. So the preparation and making sure that they have what they need so you can dive right into your topic. So if that's the preparation, then the next question is, of course, what happens while you're there? Are you going to set the stage, then they mostly talk? Is it very interactive? Are you going to answer their questions then, or do they just want you to think about them? And that's something the two of you will work out. And different mentors work in very different ways. So that's a learning experience, but something to think about. And then post, what happens after the meeting? Of course, ideally there's a thank you note of some kind, but also did you say, I'll report back, I'll let you know how the meeting went, whatever it might be, I'll find that out and let you know what I learned. And then if you do say that you're going to do that, making sure that you do it. So again, it's the prep, the during, and the post as far as your mentoring sessions. I include separate because also we all grow and change. Your context will change, your interests may change, and the whole idea that just because someone is your mentor for a certain amount of time doesn't mean they're going to be your mentor for forever. My UNLV mentors were incredibly helpful during my time at UNLV, and I'd say the first 2 years or 3 years after. After that, we checked in every now and then, but it was no longer really a mentoring relationship. Unlike Dr. Butler, who, like I said, frankly, he still thinks I work for him, but that's an okay thing because I get to use him as a mentor. But it is thinking about, you know, we've come to a time where I think I'm going to move on type of thing. And how do you just say thank you, and thank you for your time. I'm just going to move on at the moment. Way better than ghosting, which I have had happen to me too. It's like all of a sudden I've been talking to this person, they cancel the next 3 meetings, and I never hear from them again. It only happened once, so I don't want to say it's a usual thing. But thinking through um, when are not you both not the best use of each other's time, I think is probably a good way to put it. So identify, request, draw on, and separate, some things to think about as far as the mentoring process. Before we go into me giving you actual time to play with this and us working through some of it, any general questions on the model or the examples that I've given so far? All right, then let's go on. Okay, so I put this together as your game plan, and it's a 5 questions, but I'm hoping that you'll actually do this while we're talking it through. So first off, take a couple seconds and just write down, speaking of mentorship in the workplace, what is your career objective? It can be the next step, it can be long term, but what is your career objective? And I am going to ask at least 2 people to share too, because again, this is way more fun and we learn a lot more from each other if we share. So jot that down. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds. It may not be that you're not completely sure. I had actually a phone call with a student today who really doesn't know. So career objective. Okay, anybody willing to share? What's the next step on your game plan? Graduate's a good one. Okay, so your next step is to graduate. A lead chemist at a research, that's a cool one, a research facility. So thanks for that, Elizabeth. Anyone else while we're doing this? These are pretty cool. I love to see what people are thinking about doing. Higher ed. Okay, let's talk. All right, so if you think about those, who might best help you? So basically, I'm asking you, who would you want to be your mentor? And I've got 3 lines there, just 3 different people who might best help you. And here's again the idea about thinking through not just a type of person. Ooh, graduate coordinator, there you go too. Help me just, I love seeing these, help me set to join the job market. So in all of these very different things, some more general, some more specific, but now each of you put down 3 people that you think might best help you. If there's a type rather than a person, you never know. If you put the type down, somebody on this call might know somebody who fits that bill, and that's the beauty of peer learning. Okay, my current advisor, there you go. Current people in the, so we're getting a lot of very general, the type of person I'd like a department chair. Okay, let's hold on that other question then. We'll come back to that in just a minute because it's a good question. So thinking through who, we've got a bunch of answers in those. And now the challenge is, again, how do you go from saying, I'm interested in higher ed, I'd like to have a person who's a department chair, be my mentor, to I would like Dean Cummings. He's not at UNLV anymore, but I would like Candy Brush to mentor me. She's a department chair or whoever it might be. But getting to that specific person, you reach out, cold email, but you have any idea how cold emails get? So how do you switch from a cold email to a warm email, or to make it warm? One is connections, networks, that kind of thing, trying to do that. And frankly, it does work a whole lot better if it's coming through someone. But if it's a cold email, you got to think about how to warm it up. What are the connections? What are the reasons that they would want to really answer you? So think through that. I want to go back up before we go on to the next part of this. Can you ever work with mentors who are peers in the same organization, or is it better to have a little separation between you and your mentor? My answer on a lot of these things is going to be, it depends. Now, one thing, a peer as a mentor. So remember, our definition of mentor is someone who has more experience than you do. So it could be a peer, but they're more experienced in a certain area than you are. That's very possible. As far as being in the same organization, it depends on what you want to talk about. If you want to talk about the organization, and game plans in the organization, and share ideas, frustrations, challenges, opportunities in the organization, then it does help to have some space. So you might have a mentor who is helping you within the organization, but then it's also helpful to have someone who can talk from outside. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. Any other questions before we go into the next part? We've got some good career objectives. We've got some good things on who might best help you, getting to that person. Nevna, let's go into the next three. This is the how will you ask them. And of course, Aldo, you've mentioned the email. And this is absolutely something. The only thing I'll stress about emails again is how many senior people get. So part of this is about level again. And part of it is about, as I mentioned already, making your pitch. Why? If I just get an email from someone, I have no idea who they are, and they're saying, look, will you be my mentor? I don't even know what to answer, because again, why? What's the connection between us? Well, I'd be delighted to help everybody. There are only 24 hours in the day. So how do I allocate those types of things? How will you ask them? Talked a little bit about that. I'd like to hear some more ideas from you guys about how you would ask. We've got a cold email. What else might happen? While you're thinking about answering, I'm going to share one of my mentors on teaching, because he was such a great teacher. And I love teaching with him because I always learn. He was a peer mentor, I would say, in that we were within the same organization. But he really taught me to outweight a group of, an audience. And if you asked a question, he could wait longer than you can even imagine, just until somebody answers, because finally somebody will take pity on the whole room and ask the question. A presentation or conference for such a person as presenting, absolutely. Again, it's not COVID, or when it's not COVID, this is a great one. Actually, a local one that I used one time was, I wouldn't say as a mentor, but I did want a conversation with him about his project with Tony Shea, local to UNLV. So I was at a conference where he was speaking, and I did make sure that I could meet him afterwards, but I actually found somebody who knew him from the conference to introduce us. So that worked pretty well. Reached out to someone whose research I'm interested in, told them about my research and how our research could intermingle. See, that's perfect. That's the hook. You're doing research. I know your research. I've studied your research. I'm doing research in a related area. Now there's that commonality, that intersection piece to say, this is a really good reason why we might be able to have this mentoring kind of relationship. So that works extremely well. But I really stress in asking the hook. How about how will you draw on them? Any ideas on that? How you want to work with them? Or an example from someone that's already had a successful mentoring relationship that might be willing to share. And frankly, if you just put in the chat too that I'd like to, I'd like to talk about this, we can actually hear you. Well, let's go into the last one. And this is your exit strategy. And again, this is what I talked about as far as the separating part, recognizing when, it's just time to make a change. This is something, again, that since I work mostly with small business owners, men and women, it's very hard sometimes to let go of a mentor. So that's something to think about. Question: what are things that can help make you an appealing mentee and the mentor want to work with you? So two different parts of that. And the mentor make them want to work with you is be interesting. Show that you want to learn something that you can demonstrate that they've already learned. So again, people like to give back. They like to be asked. They like to share. In general, people like to help each other. So showing that connection that they might want to work with you, but also showing that you're going to put it into use. If there's to show that you actually listen, and once you are the mentee, doing those things like doing the preparation work, doing your homework, reporting back, those types of things. Not overwhelming anybody with a lot of contacts. Again, depending on the context, but make it interesting. It's also good to make it fun. Where they're learning too. It's enjoyable to talk to you, but they can tell that you're paying attention, you're listening, and you're using what they're saying. That does not mean you have to take every piece of advice a mentor gives you, not by any stretch of the imagination. It's one of those things that it's a piece of information, you take it in, you put it together with all your other pieces of information, and you make your own decisions from there. So there's that part of it. What other general questions can we have? I can go further down the line on any of these kinds of things, but you've got these questions now to think through what your game plan is. And I really just like to hear your thoughts or what else you'd like to know. It can be as simple or as complicated as you and your mentor want to make it. Is it appropriate to reach out to someone on LinkedIn who you may look up to but haven't met yet? Short answer, yes. Let me read the rest of the question. I'll come back to that. What information should you include in the message to make it appealing yet not likely? That's what LinkedIn is for, in my mind, is to make largely professional connections. So absolutely, that's a good thing to do. The ones that I like too are when they reach out and they ask for the connection, but they put in just a line or two about this is why, like the person that said before about they found someone who's doing similar kinds of research, making that kind of connection that you've got either a similar connection or a similar professional connection, but something that makes that hook. Shorter is often better than longer, at least for the first one. Ending with something like, I'd love to tell you more, those types of things after just a couple of questions is quite helpful, because then you've got the door open. LinkedIn intro is the whole thing there is to get them interested enough to want to follow up. It's not to dump the whole case on them. but it's kind of like a pitch, an elevator pitch, is that get them, they want to know more. So the kind of information, why, make your pitch about why you are an appealing kind of person without going into, every nook and cranny or every dotted I and crossed T. Good question. One thing I will add to that too is that don't get discouraged if they don't answer. People may be on, as you guys probably know this better than I do, there are people who really use LinkedIn. There are people who are on LinkedIn. And there's a lot of difference between the two. So it may be that you do that on LinkedIn, but if you can find that connection, someone else who knows them, or look at their connections on LinkedIn as much as you can see, and see if you know anybody, who are your, if they accept your invitation, is there any crossing over that? Because that can follow up on, your second request, like, oh, hey, I also noticed here, we both know so-and-so, that type of thing. What kinds of information should I share with my mentor that would be beneficial to our relationship? How much information is too much information? Again, a lot of my answers are, it depends. So in this one, it sort of depends on, are you coming to them cold? You didn't really know them before, or is it someone, like someone mentioned, their advisor, or sometimes a friend of a parent or something like that, that you know them, you just don't know them in this kind of situation. Slower is usually better as far as sharing personal information. Let them ask, see how much they share and kind of mirror whatever they share, you might share back, those types of things. So let them take the lead on personal information. As far as professional information, again, lay out the case and let them ask the questions. It's like any kind of communication, but this is a learning experience you're looking for. We don't learn anything when we're talking. We only learn when we're listening, for the most part, let's say. So the question is again, to get enough information out to get them talking and asking questions, and then you follow their lead right down the conversational path. As a mentee, how can I gauge if my work with a mentor is promising, beneficial to my personal goals? That is such a good question, because just because you're in this relationship, again, doesn't mean you're in it forever. You should also be considering, is it a good use of your time? Is it a good use of their time, kind of thing? So the challenge here is, first, knowing your personal goals, and then taking the time, probably after each conversation, and saying, really thinking through, reflecting, possibly journaling. What did I learn? What did I learn that I can use now? What did I learn that I can use later? Those types of things. So you could actually set up in your mind, as long as I know that I'm learning, 2 things a month, or whatever metric you want, without being too over quantitative on it. Pay attention to, is this moving you along? Because you are doing this as a resource. Your mentor is a social capital resource. So you need to think about, how do you manage your resources? Of course, in a most respectful way to your mentor. How should we address disagreements with a mentor? Okay, another good question. Mentors take that differently. For some, they're giving you this advice, and let's use a hypothetical case of accepting a job. And they've given you 17 reasons why you should accept this job, and you decide not to. And it may be, your reasons don't even matter. They're your reasons. It's really good practice to be able to explain your decisions as to why you've decided this. So hopefully you can explain why you've decided to go one way versus another. Thanking them for helping laying out the decision points, is also another way to say, I hear you, I do hear you. If a mentor wants to be telling you exactly what to do and doesn't like it when you don't listen, maybe time to think about that separation, because that's not necessarily a mentor then. Good mentors will understand that you'll have different reasons for the decisions you make. But again, your responsibility, I think, in the relationship is to be able to explain the why you went a different way, and then see how it's accepted and decide what you want to do from there. Any other questions? Again, it can be about the format, the tool. Just checking my notes here. I think I hit the highlights. I was trying to be very tactical. Do you recommend always formally asking someone to be your mentor? Or can it be more informal? And when's it good to be formally asked, letting it be more informal? So I would say it depends again on the context and what you really want from them. You know, if you're just looking for someone to chat with once in a while, you know, when you run into them or something like that, it doesn't have to be a big formal deal. It really doesn't. You're just learning from them. But if you want to build a mentoring relationship, and I think that's the difference. If you want to build a mentoring relationship, then I think it's only fair to the mentor that you tell them that, you know, this is what you're trying to do, that this is what you'd really appreciate from them. Again, setting the context for it, and this is what I mean by that. So, you know, as far as having somebody to chat with and be guided by in general, you know, this could be a whole scale of what you want the relationship to be and hopefully what they want it to be too. So yeah, take it as a sliding scale. Can you provide us with an example of how to professionally communicate that you'd like to separate from the mentee-mentor relationship? Yeah, again, and it doesn't have to be like a formal "I quit" kind of thing or anything like that. But sometimes it just wears its way out. So, for instance, with Dean Cummings, was when I was leaving to go to school to my next school, I basically just thanked him for his time. I told him what a difference he'd made in his life and said I'd look forward to keeping in touch in a different way in the future. So it was more that type of thing. And that's not like, well, we're never going to talk together. But, you know, explain the reasons why. But that was one of them. There was another one that was a little bit more difficult, and in that I basically said, I really appreciated their time. I think that we're starting to look at things a little differently. And now that I moved, it was when I was switching careers, one of the many times I switched careers. Now that I'm switching careers, I'd like to, again, just touch in with them once in a while. So I probably, and maybe I was just too, you know, didn't want to, I probably never said we're never talking again. I just said we're going to switch to once in a while kind of thing. Think it through. You know, I think it's better to do that than just keep hanging on these phone calls or these mentoring sessions or however you want to do it when they're not creating value for either of you. And again, it's way better than just disappearing. As the mentee, what are some important things I should know, learn about someone before asking them to be my mentor? There's a lot you could think about there. So think about the context. So I actually did formally ask John Butler to be my mentor. The other two, the UNLV gentlemen, we more fell into it. I probably didn't do it as well as I could have, and it just was a more organic process. Dr. Butler, I flat out said, I would really like to work with you and to learn with you, learn from you. So that was important. What I knew about him was, obviously, I knew his career. I did know his research, so I studied his research. I knew how he worked with other people, so I had seen how he interacts. So it's not only what he knew, but how he was with people. I knew he was an extremely generous person with his time, and I appreciated that. and I appreciated the way he looked at the world. So I knew that he was never going to just agree with everything, and he did not. Um, but that he was someone that knew the kind of things I wanted to know. He knew how to ask good questions, and he knew how to frame those questions so that I would think through the answers. Now, how do you know about that before you get them, before you ask them to be your mentor? Look around. You know, if it's someone that's not too far geographically or in a rank kind of thing, you can talk to other people. You know, you can see if you can figure out just from watching them who else they've mentored, that type of thing. But I would say the biggest parts are you're asking to be guided by their experience. So understand their experience, and then you're asking to enter into a type of mentor relationship with them. Try to learn about what kind of mentor relationships they've had. I think those would be the good ones. After someone has agreed to be your mentor, what are some strategies you can implement to be a good mentee? What qualities make for a good mentee? I'd say the strategies really come down to those three things I talked about, the working with them, you know, doing your homework, preparing, you know, and by that, it doesn't have to be super formal depending on the relationship, but making sure you're intentional about using their time, that it's, you know what you'd like to talk about, you've done your homework, if there's, you know, supporting facts either way, those kinds of things, and you keep them posted on what's happening. So for the strategies, having a plan and implementing your plan, I think are the good ones. For good mentee, listening. I think listening is a really, really important one. And then listening and follow through. And again, that, to me, that doesn't mean doing what they say, but following up on learning about what they suggest and seeing what might happen. Respect, you know, respecting their opinion, even if you're not agreeing with it, would probably be another high third. How are we doing? Anything else? And the one thing too is whether it's about mentoring or the career things I mentioned, we have just a few minutes to go. Feel free to ask anything. What do you think, Nevin? Are we about questioned out here?
Yeah, it looks like nobody else has any other questions. I'm just checking my private chat here. And
Okay.
for about,
Pardon me?
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, we can go to the last slide.
Of course.
And this is just yet questions, but to reach me if you have a question later, feel free. You know, I'm UNLV alum, so I'm very try to be loyal. What I love about this series and one of the other sessions I've done for UNLV lately is that I think UNLV is doing a great job now of reaching out to alumni who don't live in Las Vegas. So I'm really, really grateful that we can connect despite geographic distance. So LinkedIn is just Patricia Green. I'm pretty easy to find there. And if you have a question or something, that's my one of my emails, green@babson.edu. Feel free, don't mind at all. I'm happy to answer. With that, I'll give it back to Nevina.
Thank you. So before we wrap up our workshop today, I just want to extend a huge thank you to you. Thank you so much for sharing your time and expertise with us today. This was such an important topic for all of us as we begin to navigate our careers post-graduation. And thank you to all of our participants for joining us and for coming to learn something new. Just as a reminder, we're going to be posting this on our YouTube channel for your reference if you want to go back and take any notes. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at the next workshop. Thank you all.